Okay, everybody, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Today, we're going to start working on the body in earnest. Our goal today is going to be to get the doors, the trunk, and the hood fitted, and we're going to knock the glaze off the top of the body with some 220. Before we get started, though, first of all, if it's not blatantly obvious, I know very little about bodywork, so I'm really leaning on Gary a lot during this phase of the build. But I wanted to show you some of the tools that we're using for those of you that are like me and don't have a clue about this stuff. I think this would be a good introduction, so here we go. All right, start off with a simple angle grinder. This is great for knocking off the top of those mold marks, or doing like real coarse work is good for, or you can put fine on it and, like clean up a corner or something like that. So real tight spots, this is good for. However, when we get to the real tight spots, I like to go back to the old Dremel with a sanding wheel on it. It really gets into those little corners and stuff, so you can make them look real, get them nice and round and pretty looking. Now this guy here, this is called a 17-inch linear sander, okay? This is an awesome tool. Like when Gary lays the stuff on thick and then we start grinding it down to get a good finish. If you were to do it by hand, as an example, we did one side of the car over there, and by hand would have taken about an hour, and with this, it took about 10 minutes. The problem with this, though, is this thing is a pretty aggressive tool, and if you don't know what you're doing, it's really easy to take a big chunk out of the body. So you'll usually see this in Gary's hands. Next tool that we've got a lot of use out of that I've been really impressed with, actually, this is just a simple belt sander, okay? And we put a really coarse 30 grit or 40 grit sandpaper on here, and we use this to trim the doors. And what's great about it is this straight edge here goes a long way in helping us keep our door lines and everything nice and straight as we do our trims. So really like this. This little piece here is called a filler file, and it's basically just a very angry cheese grater. This is one of Gary's old tools. It doesn't even have the handle on it anymore. It's just actually the grater itself. But as you can see, it does a great job. After you lay the mud out, whether that be the fiberglass or Bondo, he lets it get to like a doughy consistency to where it's starting to dry, but it's still a little gummy. And then what he'll do is he'll use this to knock off the real high points. And this saves a ton of time in sanding because you got rid of the really ugly stuff with this. And then you can move to some sandpaper and move on. As we start getting to the finer stuff, we start looking at the orbital sander. This is just a little Craftsman battery-operated orbital sander. I've got some extra batteries, and we've used the heck out of this. I use this to go over the entire car with some 220 to get everything down to ready to have some primer put on it, okay? Another great little tool for tight spots when you're sanding the car initially to break the glaze is this little Scotch Guard pad. These things are wonderful for getting into really tight corners, where you can like put your finger into it and really kind of grind in there and get that shine off so that it'll accept the primer better. And then, of course, I bought a whole set of these little blocks here. These, you pick them up at Amazon. These things are awesome. Now, the ones I got have Velcro backs, which makes it super easy to change your sandpaper out, but you've got to buy the right sandpaper, right? It's got to have the little furry stuff on the back to make it work. But as you can see, all different shapes and sizes, and these obviously are going to be for when we're blocking the car. But I'm already very happy with this purchase. And we got these at Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below. So I've actually already started a lot of the basic work, a lot of the rubbing that's going to go on. I really couldn't see the value in you just staring at my back while I did this for 6 hours. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of lessons learned. So first thing that we want to do, two things, is we need to clean up all of the mold fittings that are on the surface of the car that we're all very familiar with. We also need to break the glaze on the gel coat so we can get good adherence to the primer, okay? So that means the entire body needs to be sanded down. So these are the three tools that I found work the best. First, number one, some regular old 220 grit sandpaper, okay? It works great, breaks the glaze off. Now, a couple learning points on that. One, if you hold it like this with your fingers, okay, you always want to move your fingers perpendicular. If you start going parallel, you're going to end up with these stripes that match your fingers. See, kind of like I have here in the dust. So you want to avoid that. But this is very aggressive. It does a good job of breaking everything up and getting us started. The next piece that I use is this Scotch-Brite. Now this works great on corners, and especially these little grooves and stuff that you'll run into. See, it does a great job of getting down inside here, which the sandpaper doesn't do as well, because the sandpaper, being a little aggressive, it'll take a lot off here and a lot off here, and you'll still have not broken the glaze in the little divot there. So that's where this Scotch Guard comes in really handy. On all the abrupt angles, that's what I'm going to use the Scotch Guard on. Okay, and then on the big fat portions, this simple orbital sander from Craftsman, it's battery operated with 220 grit on it, and on the big flatter spots, this works great. You don't want to use it too much where there's a big curve, because it tends to kind of sand in thin strips, kind of like you see where I put that shadow there. What'll happen is this will really cut deep, and then this out here will just not be barely touched at all. So this corner is where I'm going to use the Scotch Guard, and this flat portion here is where I'm going to use the power tool. Okay, and so it begins. We're on to sanding and doing what we're going to be doing probably for the next couple of months. Gary's working on getting the big mold impressions removed from the car, and I am breaking the glaze on the hood. Okay, if you look to the top left of where the light hole goes there, you can see how he's ground off the body marks. And then on the top of the fender there, he's gone and applied some fiberglass body filler. He applied it kind of thick in the middle and feathered out to the edges. And we let it set till it's still warm, but kind of doughy and hard. And now he's using the angry cheese grater thing to just knock off the top edges of it and give it a little bit of shape. He's avoiding the edges where he kind of feathered it in, and he's just getting the really gross stuff off so that he can save some time when it comes to using the sandpaper. You can see we got a good head start here. Everything here you can see with the dust on it has been hit with 220. And you can see this shiny portion here that I haven't touched yet. And that's because this is going to get a whole lot of special attention when we go ahead and cut down these mold marks. Some of the things you're looking for are voids and cracks. This is an example of a void. Probably had a little mold wax in it. You need to clean all of that out. Use a pick to get all that out of there. And then we used a little acetone, or you can use other cleaning methods to get the excess wax out of that hole. Right here is a good example where by the time we sanded off the top part of the mold, there was nothing left. It was actually right through the fiberglass. So it's not a big deal. You know, we'll have to patch that up, but that's some of the things that you're going to encounter. I'm really glad that I have the undercoating painted underneath the fiberglass that we did in video 1, because that gave this a lot more strength. Okay, so now we can go in, we'll make a patch, and we'll fill that in. That won't be a problem. But as you continue on down a little bit here, you can see these are the kind of little holes and cracks that you're up against. And in each one of these, you need to make sure that you get out all of the extra mold wax that might be packed in there. Okay, first thing we're going to tackle are the mounts on the hood that go right here on the nose. And what we're going to do is we're initially going to put them in with just 2 rivets, because we're eventually going to drill those rivets out so that we can paint it, because we're not going to paint the hinges the same color as the hood. Okay, and there they are, temporarily installed with 2 rivets. Okay, let's talk about hood latches. We're going to take the hood assembly here, and then you're going to measure from this edge to this edge, parallel to the bottom line of this rib right here, and you're going to find your center point. When you find your center point, in our case, we're going to go 12 inches to the left and 12 inches to the right, and you drill a 5/8 hole. Now, two things when you drill this hole. You want to get it as close to center as you possibly can, because you're going to put screws in here, and if you're off, the screws are going to come through the side here, and it's going to look terrible. So make sure you get that good and centered. Also, when you drill this, be very careful not to shred the metal. Those big 5/8 drill bits will really tear it up. So step it up slowly, and when you get to the bigger bits, I put the drill bit in reverse and just used a really light pressure, and it gave me a pretty clean hole. Okay, so once you get the holes done, then what you're going to do is you're going to flip it over. Once you got it flipped over, what I did was I laid a carpenter square on here so I can get a nice perpendicular line, and then I laid this in place here, found my perpendicular line, and you can see my line's off a little, but as long as the holes are parallel, you just want to make sure that this thing is as perpendicular as you can get it. And then you drill 2 7/64 holes here, and then you go ahead and screw it in with the 2 screws that are provided with the kit. And that's it for those. All right, here we go. We're going to put together the hinges for the hood. First step is to get the bushings in place, and just follow the pictures in the book. It's not rocket science. And there they are with the bushings installed. All right, you can see here we've got the arms attached to the 2-piece bracket assembly, which is held together with the 2 carriage bolts there. And the last thing we're going to do is put in the little ball that supports the gas strut that will keep your hood open. Here's what we did differently. So this is the shoulder bolt that goes through the arm, about like that, sticks out a little bit, and then you put the spring washer on, followed by the washer. What we found is that these spring washers were so light that the arms just flopped back and forth, and in my opinion that was unacceptable. So we went to Ace Hardware and we picked up some that were just a little bit beefier with a little bit higher arc. Okay, so it has more spring to it than these did. It is a little bit thicker, but it doesn't affect the installation, except in this point. By the time you put the arm on, you've got about that much shoulder sticking out to get this spring on. Okay, so it goes on easy. The problem you're going to have is when you go to tighten it, if you let that washer fall down like this one did, when you go to tighten it up, it's going to tighten on the shoulder like this. Okay, so that spring washer will continue to just flop around in there because you've never gotten it tight. You just got the washer stuck. So the easiest way I found to do it is to have someone tighten the nut, and I'll put the washer on, the spring washer, then I'll put the top washer on, and I'll hold it with my fingers so that it stays parallel to the spring washer, and then you know you got it right. You see that gap right there? When you see that gap start to shrink a little bit, hood hinge, you're going to get the best result on your hood hinges. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to mount this right on this bracket right here, just like you see right here. And all it is, it's just 2 carriage bolts that go through here and through here. And you just kind of leave it loose for now, and we'll get the trunk put on here shortly. Let me get the other one installed. Okay, now with these hood latches, what we're going to do is we're going to line these up perpendicular here, and I use the line that I originally drawn to set these screws, and then we go straight up from there, and I mark on the body itself right there. Okay, so now we're going to open the hood, and then underneath we're going to continue this line down, and then we're going to draw a line a quarter inch up from this edge right here, and then from the center line a quarter on each side. And then we're going to drill a 3/16 hole in each one of the holes we marked. At that point, we take this and we slip it underneath, and we mark the holes. Then we drill them, and we'll bolt it together. When we bolt it together, we're going to use these screws provided with the kit, but what we're going to do is we're going to use the little rubber stoppers, the little rubber pads, and we're going to put those there as well, so it kind of hides what we're doing there and also gives good support for our hood. Okay, good look at the piece of aluminum angle that comes with the kit with the 2 holes marked on it that we're going to drill to secure it in place. Hood cam locks are next, okay? What we're going to do, our technique we're going to use is we're going to put these on about a 1/4 inch up, if that, maybe 1/8 of an inch up to start, okay? And then we're going to fit them. So I got my 1/8 inch on there. We're going to lower the hood. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up on the hood and I'm going to note that space there. So that looks like probably about 3/8 of an inch. So now I'm going to open this up. I'm going to loosen this and I'm going to slide it up 3/8 of an inch. And you want to go a little bit at a time, because what you don't want to do is have it too tight, try to close it and start breaking stuff down here or up on the hood, right? So little bites, little bites. All right, and I got just enough to where you can see it pulls it down just slightly, but there's not a lot of stress on that, right? So now the hood, nice and solid, looks damn good. So probably the biggest lesson learned on the hood is in the instructions, it says to put the hood in place and secure it from underneath the car. All right, so you hook up all the hinges and stuff like we showed you before, and you get everything pretty solid, and then have somebody on top to kind of center the hood inside the hole for the hood, and then go underneath and tighten it. And I got to tell you, we tried doing it without going underneath because I'm not as nimble as I once was. And we wasted a lot of time, to be honest with you. It is much easier to just have one guy get under the car, have the other guy set the hood up on top, and then tighten your hinges up. And that gives you a great leap forward in getting it to go together on the 1st or 5th try. If you get it by the 5th try, you're doing pretty good. Let's take a look on the inside. Okay, so like I was trying to explain before, what we would do is we would snug up these bolts here, and then these ones down here on the main brackets. We'd snug them up so they could still move a little bit, and then close the hood, and then I would get under the car and we would position the hood where we wanted it, and then I would go ahead and tighten those up. And that gave us a big head start on getting this thing sorted out. One thing we did learn is these little rubber stoppers do need to be in place when you place the hood, and the sizes of them may change based on how warped your hood and your body is. For example, for us, all along the sides, we did great with the smaller version of these. But in the center, right behind the air cleaner, we needed one big one to make everything line up really nice. All right, good look at the installed hinge. Notice that the bottom portion of the hinge goes towards the engine, and the top portions of the hinge go towards the outside of the car. And you can see Gary has already sanded down the mold marks on the nose, and now what he's doing, he's going through and picking out all the little holes and getting all the extra wax out. And if the hole is only partially open, he's opening it all the way up so that we can get the Bondo down inside those holes and get a good adhesion so that our stuff doesn't flake off 2 or 3 years down the road. And I've referred to this product before as Bondo, but what we're actually using is Evercoat short strand fiberglass filler. And of course, before he got to this, you know, we got all the wax out of the holes. We opened up the holes that were only partially opened. And then we wiped it down really well with some acetone. And now it's just the magic of spreading the putty.
Now I'm going to let this dry good. You don't want to sand it until it gets pretty burnt.
Okay.
You'll have pits in your Bondo and everything else. And again, I'm calling it Bondo, but this is not Bondo right now. The reason we're using it's an Evercoat, it's a fiberglass, and it does have short strand glass in it. It is a real hard filler to use, especially on top of fiberglass. We use it as a base coat, but once you get that in there, it's a lot harder than regular Bondo.
Let's take a look at the rear trunk. The rear trunk latch. Okay, so it goes together pretty simple here, as you can see. Let me get this in focus for you. Yeah, these two screws attached to this black apparatus here. Not a big deal. Just make sure that the square lines up with the hole. And then I'm fortunate that I've already got the holes already drilled here, and I checked, they do match up quite perfectly. So I'm going to drill these out to accept the handle, and then initially I'm just going to use screws to hold this in place. Probably when I do the final fitting, I'll change that to nuts and bolts. Okay, so of course this middle one here is going to be 5/8, and technique I used on the hood that worked out really well is run the drill in reverse, and it tears the fiberglass up a lot less. It's definitely slower. You don't want to use a whole lot of pressure, but it keeps everything nice and neat. So we got it installed. We did a 5/8 hole for the middle and 3/16 for each of these two bolts to come through. That's how it looks when it's all installed. We just need to tighten these two up and we're done. Just make sure you have the latch, the opening part at the bottom, or you're going to have to take it off and flip it over. Using tape to set our gaps, and Gary will just sand up to the edge of the tape to get our straight line. Good source for info on this are the videos put out by Factory 5. Gary's using the same tape technique they use, and then we'll take it off and bring it over to a belt sander, which gives us a nice straight edge, and we'll go ahead and tidy this up. Moving on to the side vents. All right, I've already gone ahead and attached my mounting piece to the side of the vent so I could have it all powder coated at once and be done with it, okay? So that's what you're looking at here. This is the aftermarket version. I believe it's from Breeze, as opposed to the ones that come with the kit. But what I wanted to do before I started cutting on the body of the car, I wanted to make sure that this aftermarket fit the template that came with the car. So we printed out our template, and I went ahead and put it on a piece of construction paper here so I could lay it over and make sure that my vent is not smaller than the template. And it looked pretty good. Actually, what I went and did when I made the actual piece went on the car is I ended up cutting 1/8 of an inch off of the bottom just to give me a little more fudge room when I installed this, so I could still be off just a little bit and it wouldn't have a corner or an edge sticking out somewhere. So the first step was make sure that this fits my template. Now, we talked about printing out templates. Remember, if you're going to print a template on cardstock like I did, you might have to increase the size of it to like 102 or 104% so that these measurements are correct. So lay a ruler over this when you're done and make sure that this says 7 1/4 from here to here. Make sure it's actually 7 1/4 inches when you print it. Otherwise, you're going to hold this up to the car and you're going to make a hole that's the wrong size. All right. So now we're going to take the template over to the car and set it up the way I want it to look on the side of the car. So I decided I was going to use the top edge of the pre-cut hole on each side as my boundary. And I wanted to set it up to where it was the same distance along this bottom line from this edge of the tape to this dimple in the fender here. And I got that set up on both sides. So then I laid the template over like this. I traced it, took off my 1/8 of an inch along the bottom like I said, and now I've got my tape as my boundaries, and I'll just cut up to the corners of the tape. I'll start using a Dremel tool with a cutter on it to get it close. Then I'll use an angle grinder to kind of clean it up. And then we'll finish up with a sanding block to make it look pretty. Okay, this tape is super helpful here. As you saw in all the other stuff we trimmed, you can just sand it right up to the edge of that tape and it gives you a beautiful straight line. I guess the big takeaway when you do anything like this is it's always take a little bit at a time, because it's a lot harder to put it back than it is to take it off. Ta-da! All right, one of the things that I've worried about quite a lot, me and Gary both, is this hideous door ridge right here. And our big concern was if we ground it down, would the door debond? So we called a few different people and asked them, and they said, no, in fact, it will hold together. So the methodology that Gary used to clean ours up is we started with the belt sander to keep a nice straight line and clean all this stuff up here. And because the belt sander's round on the top, it was easy to work this corner out. And then we took the DA or the orbital sander to kind of clean it up. And then it looks really good to be ready for mud. So let's show you what that looks like. This straight edge here makes this really easy to clean up, and working around this curve makes getting inside here really easy. So this is a great tool for this part of the project. Okay, and this is the result of the belt sander. So we got the big ugliness off and got it about level, still rough. And now we're going to take the orbital sander, the DA, and we're going to clean up this surface here and get it ready for some either Bondo or fiberglass. Okay, after we've got everything sanded down like we just showed you there, we're going to put on a heavy coat of the Fiberglass, and then we're going to hit it. As you can see here, we've already hit it with the angry cheese grater to get our basic shape. Once that's done, we let it harden completely, and then we're going to hit it with the 17-inch sander and get this shape to the way we want it. And again, we're just going for initial shape here. This is all just getting it in the ballpark, and as we go along, we'll continue to fine-tune everything to get it looking perfect. And here's a good look of the inside of the door once we have at it with that 17-inch plane sander and get everything roughed in, get the general shape nice and smooth, looking good. Okay, before I wrap this up, I want to take you for kind of a walk around the car and show you some of the little things that we found that you need to watch out for. Some of this stuff is going to be repetitive, but I think it's worth mentioning. Okay, so first of all, as you look at this area Gary has sanded here, you notice it starts here and goes all the way out to here. I've seen some videos where a guy sands like this wide, and he's like, all right, we're looking good. Let's get some primer on this thing and get some color to it. What we're looking for here, though, is we want a smooth transition from here down to here. And with the waves in the mold and all that sort of stuff, we had to kind of spread out a little bit wider to compensate for the irregularities that are in the mold itself, right? So that's how we got that looking good. If you look here, this is one of the things you need to look out for. This is one of those pit holes that you'll see when you start sanding. They'll come up, have a little wax in it or whatever. Just make sure you clean that hole out. If necessary, open the hole up, because remember, you want, in this case, the Fiberglass to get down in there and get a good bite. You'll see sometimes where the hole is like half open, but you can tell it like goes hollow up into here or wherever. Open all that up so you can get that Fiberglass in there, and it's not going to be something that's just going to pop off a year or so down the road. All right, if we come over to this side, the sides with the most sanding, or the pieces you see with the most sanding around them, and when I mean the most, I'm talking the width, okay? Those were the areas that were the roughest on the car in terms of waves and that sort of thing. Okay, as we move up the right side, we had good luck getting these done. We moved down to the pipes, which we really didn't talk about too much. And I wish I had videoed this, but I didn't, and I apologize. What we found is when we mounted this up, the pipe on this side was lower than the pipe on the other side. And I was pretty concerned how we were going to fix that. But the fix was actually quite easy. What we did was we loosened up the motor mounts, we loosened up the transmission mounts, and we put a jack under the engine. We jacked it up a little bit, wiggled it around, set it back down, and it got to where the distance from the top of the pipe here to this opening here was within a ½ inch on each side, and I'm very happy with that. This is another area that required quite a lot of work. You can see this is where the window goes in here. You can see how we had to open that up. But this is it's kind of a low spot, and the gap was real crap. You can see how Gary's gone and already started to add material here to bring our gap back into where we want. Now, the problem we had here was the gap, the door was fine, but the body kind of came out. I'm exaggerating, but the body kind of came out like this, right? So we had to build the body back to the door to get this to kind of match up. All right, moving to the back here. If you remember, we had a small hole back here, and this was also very low compared to the door when everything else on the door was where we wanted it. So not only does it help in repairing the hole, we use that Fiberglass to build this up and get this to match up a little better. Also, we had to build it towards the door because this gap was just huge at the time, and it still needs a little work, but we'll get there. Now, moving down the back, nothing cosmic here, same as the front. The wider the area he sanded, the more irregularities that were in the body. Okay, so you can see back here, this is a pretty wide gap. And what his goal is to make this a smooth flow all the way to the back and not wavy. Okay, this is another area right in here that required some buildup. And again, we had to build our gap back here. And same thing on the other side. Where the mold mark was right here, it was much higher here than it was here. So we had to really kind of work this in and get it towards even. And again, it's still rough. We're still working on it. Other thing we ran into. So I had to open up the holes just a little bit so they didn't interfere with the bars. You'll probably have to do the same thing. However, I went with the breeze bars, as you've heard me talk about. And the difference between the breeze bars and the factory 5 bars is the breeze bars are much lower. So the angle of the bar is much more severe. Whereas the factory 5 bars are like this, the breeze bar, the back one, is like that. So that means this hole has to be elongated to handle that extra slant, okay? That's easy. Here's the hard part. No fitty dot anymore. Doesn't fit. Okay, that's our trim ring. So what I did was I actually used this as a template and drew it out. I think I went 5/8 of an inch longer. And I went online to a place that will laser cut it and send it back to me. And then I can get it plated and it'll fit right in there. I'll put the company I used in the remarks below. I get delivery of those tomorrow. I'll show you what they look like. Pretty excited about that. That was a lot easier fix than I thought it was going to be. So one of the things we've been doing, and this is Gary's idea, is if it were me, I'd have put that trunk lid in, or sorry, the hood in, and I'd have sat there and worked on that hood till it was perfect. And then I'd move to the door, and then I'd move to the trunk and do that to each item till it was done. That sounds good, but it probably wouldn't work very well in practice. What Gary is doing, and I'm very happy about, is we'll get the hood initially set in, get it kind of where we want it, have an idea of what we want to do next, then we'll come over and we'll do the same thing to the door. Then we'll do the same thing to the trunk and the same thing to the other door. And then once we're done with that, we'll come back, we'll work some more on the hood and get it a little bit closer, tighten it up a little more. And the reason for that is this whole body does kind of move a lot. So anything you do to one part of the car really does affect the other part of the car. So I'm pretty happy that we're doing it this way, and it seems to be working out really well. So proof will be in the pudding when we throw the paint on it. So let's see what happens. But that's going to do it for this video. On the next one, we'll really dive in deep on blocking and sanding and getting some primer on it and fine-tuning all of these gaps and fittings. So please join us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.